Hello, my friend, and welcome to TFU News and Views. I am your host, Anthony Bricali, owner, operator, madman behind TFU.INFO, the website, the Toy Archive, this podcast, Transformers University, the YouTube channel, and so much more. And welcome to a very special rampant speculation episode of TFU News and Views. And the reason I wanted to do this episode was I had a few things in mind. Something kind of hit me pretty hard the other day, and I wanted to just speculate a little bit on what the next either part 2 or part 3, I'm guessing I'm going to say part 2, but if it's not part 2, then you can save this for part 3 because I still think it'll fit by then. Either part 2 or part 3 of the War for Cybertron Trilogy. What are we going to get after Siege? Now, we're probably going to hear about that at New York Comic-Con. And, of course, if you know TFU.INFO, you know the YouTube channel, you know that I will be there at New York Comic-Con in October, first week of October, covering everything for October 2019 at New York Comic-Con. So please make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/TFUInfo. Now, over my time interviewing John Warden and Ben Montano from Hasbro, and particularly John Warden, because he's the one we're going to talk about today, I like to tell people he drops hints. I've realized this. He loves to work hints into his interview, whether he does it consciously or not. Not entirely sure, but there has been proof of this. I went and dug back. So we're going to do a little bit of historically, some of John Warden's hints about what was coming from the Transformer brand over time. Now we're going to go all the way back to Toy Fair 2016. So February 2016, over 3 years ago, we spoke with John at New York Toy Fair. This audio appeared on Radio Free Cybertron. This was long before I had a podcast of my own, and just give a quick listen to the hint he dropped in this conversation.
We talk about Nautica all the time. There's certainly a big fan following for that. With the Titans Return line, we typically plan everything out about a year in advance. So when I design the tools, I want to make sure that I can make the best tooling economy out of them. We recognize there's lots of female fans out there, and I certainly love Nautica in the series, and she's cool, but I can't really comment on that at this time.
Now, he totally name-dropped Nautica multiple times in that answer, and that's important because just a few months later, we got a Nautica figure in the Titans Return line. Toys don't get planned that quickly. They get planned years in advance. So there was no way that conversation affected whether or not Nautica was going to be made. Nautica was going to be made at that point in time. And this, like I said, this is a series of hints he's dropped over the years. Fast forward to September 2017, the first and probably only HasCon. My own personal interview with John. I asked him what he was reading at the time, and keep in mind this is just after they announced Power of the Primes, and he told me this.
Honestly, I've been watching a lot of episode 1 of the original 3-part episode, a lot where they're on Cybertron and they're stealing Energon out of the pipes and things like that. I also really like the Rebirth. I know it's a contentious episode, but I think that's a really good one as well. And I'm also a big fan of Call of the Primitives. I think that's a really cool episode as well. I'm a big fan of the Cybertronian modes, and I'm also I really like origin stories in general. So hearing about the origin stories again, I remember watching it as a kid, but as an adult, when you go back and rewatch it, it's still a very powerful story, and it's really, really well done.
And as you can see, he straight up mentioned the opening 3 episodes of the show, which was basically the hint for War for Cybertron Siege for the line we currently have on the shelves. Now, we're going to fast forward just a month or so later to New York Comic-Con 2017. Now, I don't have this in audio form. But the interview is over on allspark.com. If you search John Warden, New York Comic Con 2017, Allspark, you should be able to pull it up pretty quickly. He mentions in the interview, one, that at that point in time, in October 2017, the line was planned out through 2021. So not even through the beginning or all of next year, but also the following year, the second and third parts of the War for Cybertron trilogy. But he also mentions Rung by name. And he mentions him pretty I was there when he said it. I didn't do the interview, but I was standing next to the reporter from Allspark when he was asking those questions, and John was pretty emphatic about using the word Rung and the name Rung. And what did we see this year at San Diego Comic-Con? But we saw a figure of Rung, and that is the first figure of Rung, and maybe not the only figure of Rung. You never know, right? All right, so we're going to fast forward now to just a couple of weeks ago. John Warden did an interview with Slate and their podcast Working, and he mentioned a couple of interesting things that I think are worth breaking down. Now, part one here is something conceptual, and here is a quick little sample from that interview. Give a listen.
So sometimes in Transformers, the craziest ideas are the things that defy expectation, and a lot of times it's defy reason. So you could have a transformer that transforms into a bear, but that bear also transforms into an airplane. And then I'll think to myself, oh, okay, how would that even work? So you have
a bear plane
that turns into a plane that has turned into a robot.
Okay, now the ridiculousness of a bear airplane robot, how no one said barroplane in this conversation. They said bearplane. They did say that, but they didn't say barroplane, which is totally a great name for this fictitious figure that John's talking about. And I think come New York Comic Con, we need to start making the hashtag push for barroplane. So let's do, barroplane before Unicron. Get barroplane made. You tell me what you think of those hashtags, and we'll figure out one to use. Now, aside from this bear airplane robot that he mentions, and I think that one's important, and we'll get to a couple of reasons why and a couple of examples why, he also mentions Transformers as a historical brand and how everything is, every iteration is somebody's first series. And he mentions it like this.
A brand as big and huge and awesome as Transformers has 35 years of incredible storytelling, and there's all different generations of fans that are into it. You have the 80s kids like me that are into what's called G1, or you have the 90s kids that are into Beast Wars, or the 2000s people that are into, the Armada or the movies. And all of these things kind of lace together in a really beautiful way. And I think part of what we do isn't just creating toys, but it's also kind of building on that wonderful nostalgia and the promise for what's to come next.
Now, the reason I find that interesting is the four things he mentions are G1, movie, Armada, and Beast Wars, right? Now, those are the exact same four things that appeared on the connecting posters in San Diego Comic-Con, or at San Diego Comic-Con 2019. Those photos went out online on the Transformers official Instagram as wallpapers. You can go check them out. I posted them on my Twitter feed at TFU_info. They were a connecting series of posters, and each corner or each quarter of the poster represented one of those four. But it's the verbiage used and the terms used that I think are important here. So those posters, it was G1, Beast Wars, Armada, and Bumblebee movie. Now, let's eliminate two because they have things on the shelves right now, and that is G1, right, which is basically where War for Cybertron Siege sits, and Bumblebee, which is movie, which is studio series, and they all kind of sit together there, right? So we got those. Now, Armada, it's an interesting term to use, Armada and not Unicron Trilogy. not really acknowledging the following two series that come with it. I think that's because of brand confusion. I don't think they want brand confusion. Who does, right? What brand does, right? And with the Unicron figure out at HasLab, you don't want to say Unicron Trilogy. And with a trilogy on the shelves, you don't want to say the word trilogy and confuse people about multiple trilogies. So they say Armada. And in a sense, Unicron Trilogy and Armada are being represented in the current toy line. We have the ode to the Cybertron Optimus Prime with the Galaxy Force armor on the shelves. There's hints in the design features towards Armada and towards Minicons with the Micromasters. There is the artwork for Hound, which was clearly Cybertron Defense Hotshot. And whether or not we see that figure is still to be determined. But that leaves one odd group out, and that is Beast Wars. So those of you who want to rejoice at possibly Beast Wars being either parts 2 or 3 of this, now's your chance. And I'm saying Beast Wars with a very broad stroke here because I don't think it's strictly characters from the Beast Wars era, but beasts in general. And here's why. Here's why I think beasts are going to be a big part of either part 2 or part 3. Well, let's start big. Titan class, right? We have one Titan presumably left if they're going to do it, and that's going to be Scorponok, Robot City Scorpion. Right there you have a beast-style character, right? Secondly, late G1. If we're going to approach into late G1 with Generations and start filtering in some of these late G1 characters, we have things like the Pretender Beast in Catilla and Chainclaw, a bear who does not turn into an airplane, but really should. Carnivac and the Feral Hog Snarler. In Selects, we're seeing the Piranacons. Presumably, they'll be brought over here as part of Selects in the U.S. Pretenders, for the most part, are beast characters. Yes, we had a little quick stab at them in Power of the Primes, but we didn't have full-size stabs at them. And the Decepticons really all kind of fall into those beast character modes. The second-year ones included with Octopunch and Bludgeon. And even on the Autobot side with Longtooth. So you have a chance here to do Pretenders in a more modern form. And why is that important? Getting to it. In Cyberverse, right? The current Cyberverse line has characters that wear armor. And beast characters in particular, Skybite, Cheetor, Gnaw, are all making appearances in this line. It's not too far-fetched to say that Cyberverse is being used as a testing ground for what they will do in Generations a year or two later. You do the simplified version in Cyberverse and then amp it up for Generations a year or so down the line. So, and we have precedent for this. We have precedent of things appearing in one line earlier and then showing up later in a different line. For example, Generations Brainstorm. It was like the proof of concept for doing Titan's Return and for doing Headmasters again. And then, in Combiner Wars, we had Buzzsaw, which was a Titan's Return figure released early into a previous line. Coming up in Siege, we have Apeface, which is a robot that turns into a beast, which turns into a vehicle. So you have something here that's kind of akin to, the first year of Transmetals and Beast Wars, and akin to late G1, which is where they're headed. Beast would also give us a chance to do more Sharkticon bodies, or the Quintesson guards, or anything Quintesson related, even actual Quintessons, which fit really well into the weaponizers size class of this series. That if they continued with weaponizers and just did Quintessons that don't transform, because who the hell cares if you get a $20 Quintesson that looks like the cartoon model? I think everyone would be all for that, and that's something you can do really easy with 5mm points. And that brings us also back to one other thing. If they want to continue into late G1 and dip their toe into G1 Japan, Deathsaurus, a beast, he's a dragon-ish thing, and the G1 toy is kind of not very good at kind of defining what he is, but he's got a robot mode, a vehicle mode, and a dragon mode. And that was a character that was part of the fan vote a few years back. He's also a character in the Earth Wars video game, as is Starsaber. And why am I bringing up Starsaber? He's not a beast. No, but this whole series, parts 2 or 3, they're not going to be all beasts. Then there's no way, in my mind, I see Hasbro doing that. They're going to balance this out as partially beasts and partially robots overall, and familiar robots at that. But there was a photo going around the internet last month of the Commander class Jetfire figure and how similar he could be to Starsaber. And when you think about that could work as a retooling. And John Warden has dropped hints about Starsaber for many years now, continually talking about one of the designers who currently works for Takara as the guy who designed Starsaber. Starsaber is coming at some point, so why not do it where he can face off against Death Saurus and have one or both of them at the Commander class for an entire year? And the Brainmaster gimmick, when you think about it, it's a robot that goes into a larger robot. It's Pretenders to some extent. And then when you think about the one last piece we saw at San Diego Comic-Con, Micromaster Combiners. So they're going to delve into that to some extent, which is pretty cool because we might get an Oiler and Slide. If you're fans of the Optimus Prime comic or the old Robots in Disguise book, that's pretty neat to get updates on those characters. And especially if they're going to dive into the previous IDW continuity, they would also give them the chance to do Gimlet alongside of them. So as you see, we have this whole grouping of characters here that could fit into an upcoming line and for the most part cohesively make sense together for a year, for a handful of waves. And so that's why I'm rampantly speculating. I'm calling it now. This is August 2019. You know what? In October, if I'm wrong, you tell me I'm wrong, but I'm going to tell you wait until part 3. And if I'm wrong for part 3, you could tell me I'm wrong again. But I think this is it. I think there's going to be some sort of Beast series or Beast component to the upcoming series announced at New York Comic-Con 2019 in October. And once again, you can catch TFU.INFO at New York Comic-Con. It's barely 2 months away. Online, on the social media, and on YouTube. And how do you find all that? I'll tell you, really easy if you don't know already. Twitter is where you can find me. That's usually where I'm chatting up something about Transformers. That is at TFU_info. YouTube.com/TFU.INFO is the channel. It's where you'll probably watch this as a video or check out the podcast in their video form. Facebook and Instagram, either one of those, .com/TFU.INFO, and of course on the web at www.tfu.info, the world's longest running transforming toy archive. And we are just coming up on our, doing the math here, 17th anniversary. Wow. From the official launch, not from the soft launch. So before I take off, I want you to tell me what you think. Hit me up on the social media. Hit me up in the comments of this video and tell me if this sounds correct to you or if this sounds nuts. And if this sounds nuts, tell me what your idea is. Not what you want. Not what, I hope this happens. Wishful thinking is fun. This makes sense given the evidence we have. So present to me your counter argument. Tell me why something else makes more sense. As always, please subscribe to this podcast and to Transformers University, my main podcast, where we break down the history of Transformers and talk about why we love them. We're currently cruising through 1986. We just covered the 86 European toy line, and we're going to make a leap back to the U.S. toy line next week with some other fun stuff coming up. Of course, we talk comics, we talk cartoons, we talk Transformers the movie. We talked that one a lot this year in 86. It's all there on Transformers University. You can subscribe to that and this wherever you get your favorite podcasts: iTunes, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and YouTube, and more. So please subscribe, give us a good rating, and tell people about us. It's the best way to grow the show, and it's the best way to make sure the show keeps on happening. Until next time, I am your host, Anthony Bucali, owner, operator, madman behind TFU.INFO. See you.